Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fifth episode of the Pons Talk. My name is Xingyu Ye from Dahong Shanghai International Chinese School, and I will be your host today. In this podcast series, we'll be interviewing Dulwich College International alumni on their personal and professional development, social engagement within the Dulwich College International alumni family, and pioneering change to create positive global impact. Today's guest, dialing in live from Singapore, is Dulwich College Singapore alumni Tobias Nash. Hi, Toby.
Hi, how you doing?
Hi, I'm good. So I want to begin by discussing your Dulwich experience. So my first question is that, what do you think is the most important thing you have learned from your high school life at Dulwich, Singapore?
Great question. I think the most important thing that I've learned is just to explore and to fully commit to going where your interests and your passions lead you, and knowing that you'll make sense of what you've discovered in the future, and you'll be able to draw common threads of interest from all that you've explored and draw experiences and skills out of those areas that you can take forward in your life to make a greater impact wherever you are.
Yeah, so you mentioned about your passion, and I heard that your passion is related to sustainability and environment. So my next question is that how your time at Dulwich shaped a passion for sustainability and environment?
So before I came to Dulwich, I was beginning to get passionate about issues of sustainability. Living in London, there was quite a strong focus on making that city greener, and so that sort of rubbed off on me. So coming to Singapore, I had much greater exposure to these issues of sustainability, given Dulwich's focus on the sustainable development goals and making a sustainable group of schools. So the greater exposure to these global issues enabled me to explore the ones that interested me. And in the IB, I was able to really delve into the issue of marine plastic pollution through both a CAS project of mine and also my extended essay, which focused on how we can eliminate single-use plastics in Singapore.
Wow, that was really interesting. So you mentioned about how IB really shaped people as to a well-rounded person, and you also mentioned about the sustainable development goal, which Dulwich really gives students opportunity to care more about these global issues. And I want to ask, are there any memorable sustainable development goal related activities provided by the school that you participate in? And what is your role in these activities? And what exactly did these activities help you as a person?
Main CAS projects that I was involved in as part of the IB program. So the first being the Marine Eco Group, where we focused on raising awareness about the threats facing the marine environment in the world, whether that be from banning shark fin soup, for example, or whether this be focusing on the danger of using single-use plastics and how that can have a detrimental effect on the marine environment. And the other sort of sustainability focused group there was a number of community action groups. And one that I was part of was looking at social sustainability, and it had a particular focus partnering with Food Bank to give food packages to the local community in need. And all of this really heightened my sense of making an impact locally is the best way to make an impact globally.
Yeah, so you talk about your marine eco group. So you talk about how people are using single-use plastic and throw them to the ocean. So what exactly did Marine Eco Group take some actions towards to solve this issue?
A lot of assemblies that we held in which we raised these issues. We made a number of videos and campaigns where we put posters around the school to primarily raise awareness about why these issues are so important and how the little actions that we make can have drastic effects when they are accumulated, particularly in a school like Dulwich where there's a lot of students. And so if every student makes a little small change, that will compound into a rather big change when all of the students act in one way or another.
That's really great. Can you talk about one of the most memorable events that you have participated in at Dulwich?
Probably the most memorable event was for Earth Week. Greta Thunberg had just arrived in New York, and there was a lot of press around that and the speeches that she gave. The event itself was held in the main quad of the senior school. And I just remember the whole school lining each and every of the 6 floors in the senior school. And I was asked to give a speech on sustainable actions and how they can compound to greater effects going from the local community, and then sort of that little drop in the pond creating ripples out into the whole of the world. And there was this really great buzzing atmosphere where everyone was gathered together to join forces and collectively make a sort of statement in the community that we're keen on sustainability, we're passionate about making a difference. I feel like that was a very meaningful experience for me and also for the younger children that I think we were able to inspire to take up more interest about sustainability.
Yeah, it seems like you participated in many like campaign and movement stuff to advocate for some changes around the world. That was really interesting. Then I want to talk about like, what is your university major?
So I'm going to UCL to study psychology. And now I know that sounds a little bit like, how is that related to sustainability?
Yeah.
But the way I reason it is that looking at the global issues and getting under the skin of them, you often find that at their base, they are psychological issues, or what I like to say is the neurological root of these issues. And that insight, I guess, came from the opportunity to explore these issues that I got from being at Dulwich and taking the IB. So this was in my extended essay where I was passionate about ending the use of single-use plastics because it seemed vastly unnecessary for the domestic uses that they have in Singapore. Then I was encouraged to explore the psychological aspect of this. In conversation with my psychology teacher, I got some really great resources together and went deeper and deeper into this issue of single-use plastics and why they're so pervasive, and ultimately found that there's a serious psychological underpinning to this issue, and it's vastly to do with the neurological bias that we have towards convenience. And this not what the issue is with single-use plastics, but it also provides us with a solution, knowing that the reason why we use single-use plastics is because they're convenient. Means that if we make them inconvenient to use, if we add friction to a effectively frictionless system, then they will be less and less used, and we can transfer to better habits and better behaviors and reduce the amount of waste products that we output. This is the insight that showed me that my passion for psychology directly intersects with sustainability.
It was really interesting major, and the reason why you choose this as a major is also really convincing. And you also mentioned a lot about how Dulwich give you the opportunity to really focus on all these sustainable issues and sustainable goals. And I think that not only Dulwich, but also in the home, we have a lot of like activities that is related to these sustainable goals, and to encourage students to make some positive impact around their community by taking some small actions toward these sustainable goals. And I thought that is really interesting. And I want to ask, have you like encountered some struggles when choosing your major? Because I thought that according to your past experience, I thought maybe like environmental science and these sort of major is also really suitable for you. So have you encountered any struggle when choosing between different majors, or you just want to do psychology straight away?
I sort of went through many different phases in my IB. It's already a very tumultuous time, but given I only moved to Dulwich for those 2 IB years, it was particularly tumultuous because I was given this greater exposure which Dulwich offers to many different issues and different subjects that I wouldn't have pursued before. Different skills, like I picked up 3D printing because why not? And this sort of radically shifted my focus from the avenues that I was pursuing before to my horizon suddenly being much broader, so I could explore so many different options of what my next step might be. I went from raising awareness about issues of sustainability through a media route by pursuing a degree in filmmaking to design and designing systems that would be sustainable and materials that would be more environmental than, say, single-use plastics. And then after a lot of reflection and through the first months of my gap year, finally settled on psychology. And that's been as a result of a lot of reflection. I kind of break it down into 4 principal steps, 4 principal parts of a process of reaching that conclusion. The first was committing fully to exploring and letting my interests and passions lead me. So pursuing things that I didn't think of before, yet were presented to me, opportunities that arose, and just giving everything a go. And then the second step was reflecting on why these things interested me and trying to find intersections between these new passions that I had found. The third step then was to consider what I might like to do with my life, which I found was to help answer existential questions related to consciousness and help solve global issues such as eradicating waste products like single-use plastics. And then the fourth step was to think about what skills do I have and how can I most effectively make the impact that I'd like to have by working back from these eventual effects, these eventual goals, to key checkpoints along the way, and then ultimately to finding out what my next step should be. So thinking about the intersections between my different interests, psychology really sort of sat in the middle of that intersection. Yeah. And both answering existential questions related to consciousness and solving global issues involve knowledge of and research into psychology, human psychology, why people act the way that they do. And therefore, studying psychology at university was the logical next step for me.
Yeah, I think like your steps really inspire me a lot. I would also took these steps like when I want to choose a major for my university. And you also mentioned about how you took a gap year before officially entering university. So what inspired or impacted you to take a year off before the actual university life began?
I think it kind of came from the rather tumultuous time that those 2 IB years were. The constant workload really was what I had to prioritize. And I knew that getting as best grades and as much knowledge as possible out of the IB would stand me in good stead for the future, regardless of what I did. So that's really what I had to put my focus on. And that's definitely what I'd encourage everyone to do. But then I wasn't really sure by the end of IB what I was really passionate about. These common threads were starting to emerge through my explorations, say with my extended essay and CAS projects and different subjects, but they weren't very clear. And that there was still a lot of reflection to be done that I didn't get the opportunity to do due to the hecticness of the IB. My gap year really offered me the opportunity to take stock and consider the impact that I'd like to have and what I'd like to achieve with my life, and also take up internships to utilize the skills that I have and see where my skills might fit in the workplace and how I can make the changes that I want to see through my work. I'd really encourage anyone, if they are unsure about what they'd like to do, to take a gap year. Just explore and reflect what the impact you want to have is and how you can best get to that point.
Yeah, I think like gap year is really a great opportunity to reflect and explore like your passion or what you're really interested about. So I want to ask, how did you make plans for this entire gap year?
Originally, I was planning to do things like the Camino de Santiago walk and go to South America and do some work there related with sustainability and things like that. But the travel restrictions came in place, and now my plans had to shift to what can I do in Singapore. Another thing that I wanted to pursue was an internship in sustainability. And so when I heard that Darcy, who had come to our school and given some talks, and I had actually interviewed for my extended essay, was newly appointed as the head of sustainability for the group, I contacted him and asked if I could do something with him to make an impact in the schools. And so he offered me this internship, which turned out to be a super useful time because I was able to lead this carbon audit in Dulwich, Singapore, where we collated all the data for the calculation of the carbon footprint of Dulwich in Singapore, and then a plan to offset that in the future.
Yeah. So during like the process, what are some challenges you have encountered through your internship, and how did you overcome all these setbacks?
One of the principal challenges was the communication across Zoom. Instead of just asking someone what they mean by something or whether what you're doing is what they intended for you to do, you have to collate all your queries and then set up a call to go through each one and have an effective problem-solving session. So that's different from working side by side with someone in a physical space. So that was definitely a challenge. Another challenge was the slight tedium of filing through invoices, collecting the weight and origin of each item that Dulwich procured, which was necessary for the carbon audit. However, I knew that this was going to be a really useful resource and it was going to have a great impact. And so focusing on the impact, again, helps you get over the possible tedium or challenges that you might encounter and keep pushing through, keep pushing forward to the impact and the change that you want to see and that you are working to make. After I had overcome that sort of hurdle, the problem-solving component of streamlining the auditing process and the data collection template for the use in other schools was something that I really enjoyed.
Mm-hmm. So, are there anything else you want to share about your gap year experience?
The time and the freedom that you have. It's imperative that you don't just let it slip away to scrolling through Instagram. You must set aside time to do the things that you really want to achieve, and constantly reminding yourself of your mission statement, if you can create one very early, is super helpful in keeping you focused and on task. If you keep reminding yourself, this is what I'm working towards, this is what I need to do, these are the steps I'm taking, then it's highly motivating for you to do the things that you deep in your soul want to do.
Yeah, it seems like you have learned a lot through this like gap year experience, and your suggestion is just really useful. And one last question for gap year is that what have you gained throughout the process of this entire gap year in perspective on life and your future studies or career that you didn't know before or never thought about before?
if there's something that you want to achieve, or there's a change that you want to make, you need to be able to find a way to reduce friction and reduce the number of steps needed to get to that point. And if you want to stop something happening or stop doing it, you need to increase the amount of friction between you and that thing. I guess I've learned that through the carbon audit. When there's a lot of different steps and different people involved in the process, there is a lot of friction in the system. From a managerial standpoint, from a business standpoint, that's given me quite an insight into how best to collaborate with people.
That's really inspiring. And so our family of Dulwich and Hall schools always like educated students to be caring about what happening outside of their community and what happening around the globe, and to be a global citizen. And hearing your experience, I really think that you really did a lot of activities to advocate for some changes around the world. And I want to ask, what is your definition to global citizens, and how do you define this word?
Global citizenship means having a heightened awareness of the impacts that you are having and the impacts that you want to have. And having that awareness should equip you to make the two identical. If they're different, then there's a problem. And the way to make the most impact is to make the two converge, so that the impact that you do have is the impact that you want to have. Try and make your actual behavior and your intended behavior the same. That's what it means to me to be a global citizen.
Okay, so what do you think is the most important quality, or the most important trait that a global citizen should have?
I think the most important quality for a global citizen is to be reflective and self-aware.
So I also heard that you're a third culture kid. So as a third culture kid, what are the challenges you anticipate in your transitions to life in a UK university?
I think the biggest challenge is going into an inwardly focused community when we're outwardly and globally focused, and not being frustrated that people are inwardly focused, but trying to gain a symbiotic relationship where the inward focus and the outward global focus both improve and strengthen each other. And that's crucial to developing well as a world and developing well as an individual.
Yeah, just so great to hear all of your experiences and stories. And one last question is that, what do you want to encourage other members of the Worldwide Alumni Network to consider doing to make a difference in the world?
I think you've got to just sit down and consider and reflect on what you are really passionate about. What would get you up in the morning each day, focusing on one particular issue, one particular thing that you'd like to see in the world, one particular change that you'd like to make. Write it down. And when you have that particular goal in mind, that will subconsciously or consciously affect the many actions that you make on a day-to-day basis. Something that I read in this book called Atomic Habits, which I would really recommend everyone reads, is really helpful in this context. The author says that everything is a process, and that you've got to remind yourself that the way that you achieve what you want to achieve is not by doing everything right and everything how you think it should be done, because naturally you'll make mistakes or forget to do something. But the most important thing is to do more good in terms of getting to where you want to be than bad. So the way that you get to that end goal is by taking more steps forward than you take back. So if my goal in this instance is to not use single-use plastics, then sure, I will use single-use plastics in the future. And you must be aware that that will happen and be okay with that. But you must commit to at least 50% of the time not using single-use plastics, so that you are gradually moving towards the point where you never use single-use plastics, for example.
Yeah. Thank you, Toby, for your time. It was really a great opportunity to speak with you.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed the 5th episode of the Pons Talk. For more information on the Worldwide Alumni Network, please check out our website, alumni.dulwich.org. Stay tuned and looking forward to having you with us next time.